tutorial on space planes. Here we go. This is the Darius one. Okay, so first and foremost, you can design however you want to design. A couple of things that go into the design of a space plane is you need a lot of thrust. You need engines that can go supersonic. But if we open up something like the Rapiers, late technology, late tech tree engines, at Mach 3.7, we get 465.642 kilonewtons of thrust. Okay, this is something that we want, right? We need engines that can go supersonic and pass the speed of sound. All right, second step, we need something like shock cone intakes, also late stage technology. As the air gets thinner, the higher up the plane goes, we can still intake plenty of air to feed these engines. Okay, supersonic engines, shock intakes. Boiled down, we just need a lot of thrust and a lot of fuel and the ability to go high. I personally use the Rapiers a lot because it makes things super simple. I only need one engine to perform both air breathing and closed cycle engine operations. Okay, and what I mean by closed cycle is you have your airplane engines and you have your rocket engines. The Rapiers can do both. All right, so center of mass, center of lift. These two icons down here, right? You try to shoot for where it is currently to closer up, right? You don't ever really want your center of mass on top of your center of lift. You don't want them to be spot on with each other. You also don't want your center of lift to be way back here or way up front. This can make sense if you imagine the center of lift like a lever around your center of mass. So fuel. The thing about SSTOs is you don't really know how much fuel, liquid fuel and oxidizer that you need. And a way to keep this nice and simple is when I start a build, I'll just do all of my tanks with LFO, and then I tweak as I figure out what the plane needs. All right, so what I mean by simulating empty fuel tanks is I watch what the center of mass does. We'll see that it shifts as these tanks get emptier and emptier, right? So you just do this to all of your fuel tanks, empty every single one of them, and see where your center of mass goes, and this will give you a good idea as to once you're in orbit, where you need to shift your fuel to ensure that it shifts closer to where it needs to be before you re-enter. And that's kind of really it. This is a very simple, it looks complex and it looks high tech, but it is a very simple space plane. It's a very simple airplane design and it's a very simple space plane design. But I will forever be a proponent of when you first start learning space planes, start small. You don't even try with a cargo bay. Just try to build a small plane that can get into space and get into orbit and re-enter. Right, the second phase of building an SSTO is crucial. Every SSTO is different and there's a lot of variables with how your design comes to fruition. And we're going to take mental notes of how our SSTO performs and what it needs and what we need more of, what we need less of, etc., etc. The ascent profile of a space plane. I just took off the runway, and if we look down here at my nav ball, I'm only holding roughly a 15-degree angle of attack. And the reason that I do this is because I want to build speed, I want to maintain acceleration, but I'm not quite high enough to start going supersonic, right? So we're just going to climb and we're going to build speed while we do so. All right, so now we're kind of approaching what I in my head refer to as phase 2 of an SSTO ascent profile, where my speed is starting to drop. I'm going to go ahead and pitch down a little tiny bit, and I can see now that my speed is increasing. The faster we go, the more thrust we output, and so our speed will just keep stacking up. I go faster, therefore I produce more thrust. But this 10-degree angle of attack here is really good, because what we don't want to do, contrary to popular belief, is we don't want to immediately try to get to 30 kilometers of altitude and then go fast, because most of our speed that we build for orbit is built in the atmosphere. All right, so I have not altered the ascent profile of the Darius 1 at all. As we go faster and as we climb, the plane will naturally pitch up, right? But we're approaching now phase 3 of the ascent, where we're at about 20 kilometers above sea level, losing more and more air because we're going higher and higher up. Our speed will start to drop again. And the goal right here is to build as much speed as possible before we do this, and we swap to a closed cycle engine operation. I'm going to pitch up a tiny little bit, and I'll just hold this. Every plane is different. Yours might not like it. It just depends. This is why we test. And I'll just do this for a little bit to get my apo at least close to the Kármán line, if not over, before I just do a long continuous burn, right? This is where everybody's plane is different and everybody's play style is different. Is I like to do a long continuous burn. It just feels nicer. But you can set your apo axis right here to 75 kilometers and then just wait to get to your apo and then burn, right? To close your orbit. All right, so we are in orbit and we're wanting to re-enter and land at the KSC now. The thing that you have to do before you re-enter the atmosphere is your center of mass in your SSTO will have shifted. All right, and this is why we simulate in the hangar empty fuel tanks to see which way our center of mass shifts, because our center of lift does not change, but our center of mass does. All right, so now that we have shifted all of our fuel where it needs to be for a proper stable re-entry, I personally, this works for me almost every single time. Some people have different methods. Some people will just burn retro and drop straight back into the atmosphere. But what I like to do is when I'm about right here or so in relation to the KSC, because I like to land there after a mission is done, I will go ahead and flip retro right now, and I'm going to burn for a periapsis of about, I usually do about 30 kilometers, and it treats me well. All right, so we are approaching the Kármán line. We are about to re-enter the atmosphere. Our periapsis is at about 30 kilometers above sea level. I've gone ahead and I have retracted all my panels. The fuel is moved around, and we're ready to go. All right, so once I re-enter the atmosphere, this is entirely personal preference, and because the Darius 1 is very stable, I get a little confident in doing so. I like to engage my speed brakes here. I like to put those up, and I will preemptively pitch down very aggressively to start shaving off as much speed as I can. And what'll happen is as we continue to re-enter, our nose will match back up with our prograde as our trajectory continues forward. All right, so as things start to get hot, right, we can see that we're getting aerodynamic force. We're at about 50 kilometers above sea level right now. I personally will continue to pitch down, but this again entirely depends on your design of your SSTO. I'm gonna go ahead and look at my map here, and because I like to try to land back at the KSC, I will alternate between pitching up and pitching down above my prograde node. And the reason that we do this is if I'm overshooting, what that means is I need to induce more drag, meaning I need to pitch down more. If I'm undershooting, right, I want the aerodynamic forces to continue to lift my airplane so that I maintain altitude for as long as I possibly can. And some things to note here too is your plane is gonna get hot. You won't die, especially if you've given it a couple of laps and your plane has adequate time to cool down, or if you install radiator panels like I do on my SSTOs. So about right here in the re-entering process, if you have not transferred your fuel around, it's probably where you're gonna flip, and you're not gonna have an airplane anymore. You're just gonna flip and you're not gonna be able to fly. All right, so we can see now that we have sufficiently slowed down. I have undershot the KSC by a lot. It's past the mountains, so I'm just gonna flip around and land in the water. All right, yeah, that's pretty much it. We landed, we lived. So yeah, hopefully this helps. Go build some space planes.